Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our little prep session. I'm Jay Nichols. I'm Director of Federal Policy and Governmental Affairs. Joining me is Chrissy West, our Director of Advocacy. Want to thank you for taking time from all your busy schedules to join us and to start getting ready for our big day in the Hill, which is 13 days away. In addition to the Day in the Hill, we're going to begin, obviously, with our second annual child care rally, which we'll go into a little more detail shortly. But want to, again, thank you all for joining us, and just want to give you just a little bit of background of what we seek to accomplish this afternoon in the short amount of time we have. We're going to go over a lot of the logistics. I know many of you on this phone have been contacting either Chrissy or myself or others in our department with questions about meetings and how do you prepare for meetings and what exactly is it we are seeking from congressional staff and their elected members of Congress. So we're going to cover all that. And there will also be another prep session Wednesday at the Marriott Marquis at 4 o'clock, where we're going to go more in depth and prepare everybody for the full day of April 19th. So with that, I'm actually going to turn things over to my colleague Chrissy, and she is going to briefly go through some of the logistics and preparing for your meetings, but also to discuss the Family Summit. Chrissy?
Thanks, Jay. So as far as scheduling meetings, we've gotten a lot of questions on this, and I know it's been a little bit confusing, so we wanted to just be clear. States that have family advocates attending, you don't need to schedule your Hill appointments. We actually have our policy associate, Jake, here, who is going to be doing that for you. I know some of you have already scheduled your meetings, often because you don't normally have family advocates or because you're just really on the ball. So if you can enter those into the form that we sent out earlier this week, that would really help us so we don't double book, we don't waste anybody's time, staffers aren't confused as to why we have multiple appointments. That would be really helpful on our end. And we'll actually be listing the states, in case you aren't sure, that have advocates coming in a couple slides. But if you need any of those forms or info, again, feel free to send either Jay or myself an email, and we can forward that stuff back out. So the states that have no family advocates attending, as usual, you should plan to schedule your Hill appointments with your lawmakers. That's for April 19th. It's a Thursday, between 10 a.m. and 3:30 p.m., if at all possible. And then once scheduled, entering them into the form that we sent out earlier this week, just so that we have enough materials for everybody and we make sure that everyone in your group is covered. So prepping for Day on the Hill. If you guys have a family advocate attending with your state team, you will be able to reach out to them in advance if you haven't already done so. No pressure, but if you don't reach out to them in advance, then the first time you'll meet them will be at the Day on the Hill prep session that Jay mentioned will be on that Wednesday before. You might also have a CCAoA staff person attending your meetings along with you, so just don't be surprised. We send them along sometimes just to make sure that our family advocates feel comfortable and, someone that they maybe have already met is with them and that there's, extra talking points and someone to just kind of back them up. One point about dress, please wear comfortable shoes for Day on the Hill. If you want to wear sneakers and change before you go into the offices, that's totally fine. Comfortable flats. You will want to cut your feet off at the end of the day if you are walking around in heels. So just a note. And we have our Turquoise Childcare Works t-shirts again this year. They're actually a little bit more comfortable material than they were last year, if I do say so myself. So if you can plan your outfit accordingly for Thursday, we find that they look really sharp with like a blazer or a cardigan. You can wear it like with your suit under your jacket or, a skirt, some kind of bottoms, whatever you plan to do with your outfit, to just plan around that so that we're identifiable on the Hill. It makes a really good visual to see all of our turquoise short shirts kind of walking around the Hill, and it really looked really sharp last year, especially for the rally. So if you guys could just plan your outfits accordingly for Hill Day, that would be fantastic. A note, Jay is reminding me there's a chance that it might rain.
Oh, it happened last year. So
yeah. So if you have a small, portable umbrella that you don't mind carrying around, that would be great. Jay will go over towards the end of the presentation some things that you are and are not allowed to bring into the Capitol. So That'll be covered there. But if you have a small portable umbrella and want to bring it with you, I think we'll have ponchos, but honestly, who wants to walk around in a poncho all day? I think that's kind of gross. So anyway. All right, and about the Family Advocacy Summit. So we're really, really excited this year. We have not quite 40 individuals and family members coming in from around the country, and they're coming from 15 different states. So they have all different stories. They have health and safety stories, professional development, affordability, access. We have several people from Texas, actually, that have sort of an affordability access story combined. They started their own child care program on campus. So you'll definitely want to meet those guys. We're really excited about the stories they have to tell and the points that they have to make, which we think really kind of make the case for the asks that we're going to be making on the Hill this year. The advocates will be prepped in advance on how to share their story and tie it to legislation. So you don't have to worry about that. We just want you to make sure that you welcome them, you engage them as part of your team, and kind of encourage them to share their story with lawmakers and legislators' staff. This is really kind of the heart of what we do, is making sure that they're getting their story across, and it's putting an actual face to the issue of childcare in the states. So we're really excited to have them. And you'll see here, the states in red are actually the states that we have advocates from. So if you are one of the states in red, please note that you should have received a list with family advocates from your state that you could reach out to in advance if you would like. No pressure. And again, if you didn't receive that, you can just reach out to Jay or myself, and we'll be happy to send that over so you can get in touch with them. And back over to Jay.
Yeah, thanks, Chrissy. Before we get into the specifics of what we're going to be advocating for, I thought it'd be a good idea if I briefly went over our near 80-year history with regards to federal investment and involvement in child care. The first actually began during World War II, known as the Lanham Act, and it benefited nearly 500,000 children. As you know, many of their fathers were overseas in battle, and the mothers were in the factories. So it was the first federal child care program with the federal government footing most of the bill. And then local communities were supposed to cover the remaining cost, roughly the remaining third of the cost. And it was, as you can imagine, it was a temporary program. It was just to really help families who had mothers working and fathers serving. But it was the first of its kind. And after it ended, child care really wasn't on the federal government's radar. And it stayed that way for nearly 25 years. But unfortunately, in an effort to get a federal program moving during the Nixon administration, under Senator and former presidential candidate Walter Mondale and Congressman John Brandeis, they came up with what was called the Comprehensive Child Development Act, which would have been basically a nationally funded child care center-based program that would be administered locally. Something very close to the way Head Start was established. In fact, I think a lot of it was modeled after the Head Start program, which came to existence about a few years earlier. And it not only did it have an educational value, but it also had a medical and nutritional programs to it as well. Unfortunately, President Richard Nixon did not support it, and so he vetoed it. And once again, it seemed that there wasn't obviously not enough to override the veto. Again, it's another decent amount of time passed before child care really came back up for the national conversation. It actually, in the late 1980s, then President Ronald Reagan established a National Commission on Children made up of experts to identify ways that both the federal and state local governments could serve the needs of children and families. And they actually, as a result of that commission, President George H.W. Bush actually signed into law in 1991 kind of like the down payment on what is now called the Child Care and Development Block Program. And But in 1996, it was expanded, basically under welfare reform in 96 with President Clinton, and then Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich, and Senate Majority Leader Bob Dole. Child care got basically at least a guaranteed amount of funding every year through what's called the mandatory funding stream, which is also the same stream that funds Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. In addition to, so basically the CCDBG now had two sources of funding, and it has remained that way over the past 22 years. So over the course of 18 years, child care received basically about $2.9 billion in mandatory funding, and then it did have a discretionary funding source, but it was fairly, it was usually capped at just over $2 billion for a long period of time, and that never really received an increase. And in 2014 is when CCDBG was once again reauthorized, but also greatly expanded. As a result of 2014 law, states now had to, and providers and local resource referral networks had to now adhere to new health and safety laws, new monitoring, new comprehensive criminal background checks, and it also prioritized more investment, better training, better health and safety, and expanding eligibility and trying to connect as many programs as possible. We at Child Care Work America, and most of you on the phone, I think we all supported the bill's reauthorization. There was just one problem. There was just one issue with it. The new bill did not provide really much of any new funding whatsoever. It only authorized about $400 million in new money, and that was far short of what the program needed. And so over the last couple of years, we've been able to advocate for a decent amount of increases, probably anywhere between $75 and $100 million annually, but still well short, more than $1 billion short of what was needed, especially for last year, and to not only keep children in care and help more children gain access to care, but also to provide the proper support for states to meet the new mandates, which there were many of them, and many of them had to be compliant over the course of the last year. So we've obviously been working hard over the last few years to get more investment, more federal dollars to CCDBG, and we had a major breakthrough about 2 months ago. In early February, congressional leaders basically reached a budget agreement where, and before I go into the details, basically since 2013, the federal government budget, all military and non-military programs, and the programs that we are excluding is Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and some child care funding. Basically, all this funding was capped at a certain level, and the only way that Congress and then President Obama and now President Trump could get a final budget deal done was that they all had to agree to lift the caps and allow more funding, to get through. They did in 2013 and 2015, and in February they did again, and this is probably one of the biggest lifts that we've seen. What they did is they agreed to $300 billion in new discretionary funding for 2018 and 2019. Basically, funding that the federal government's budget year is October 1st to September 30th of the following year. So basically, the money would be appropriated through September 30th of next year. Of that $300 billion, congressional leaders agreed to provide $5.8 billion in new funding for CCDBG. The Congress passed it, and the White House agreed to it. Now, for FY18, how did we do? And I think everyone's aware of this. Well, we got a $2.4 billion increase, which is great. We're about we came up about $500 million short of what was agreed to for this year, to bring us to 2.9, and hopefully get the balance of the 2.9 for fiscal year 2019. But it was the biggest increase for child care in history, And it's definitely, we're ecstatic to have it. I know many of our state folks and advocates are thrilled about this precedent that's now been set to provide more investment in child care for the long term. Now, how is CCDBG funded? As I mentioned earlier, it's through the Child Care and Development Fund, and it includes CCDBG, what's called child care entitlements to states, and then, of course, temporary assistance for needy families. States are actually allowed, this is the Welfare to Work program, TANF. States are actually allowed to divert some of the funds or transfer some of the funds specifically for welfare to work and may use it towards CCDBG needs. While there are certain, there are a handful of sources that support CCDBG, they must obviously adhere to what's under the CCDBG Act of 2014. And once again, there are two sources of funding. The big one, the bigger number at the top, the $5.3 billion in discretionary funding, that's what was included in the appropriations bill that they just enacted into law a couple weeks ago. That also includes a $2.4 billion bump that they got from the budget deal. And then the $2.917 billion is actually through what I mentioned earlier, known as the mandatory funding stream, which also funds Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. And that $2.917 billion is guaranteed money every year. So this big boost in funding is for a program that only reaches about 1 in 6 eligible children. This is certainly going to help more children gain access and obviously provide more longer-term support for better quality care in general. Many of you, I've actually already received emails from some of you that are probably on the phone, certainly from people we're going to all see in a little over a week. But I just, for those of you that aren't familiar, I just want to kind of go through what you're seeing on your screen now is supposedly how, it's supposed to be how the budget process moves. Early in the year, the President of the United States will submit a budget request to Congress. That usually comes about a week after the State of the Union. Congress usually then passes what's called a budget resolution that kind of sets, not only does it kind of set benchmarks and goals for the upcoming fiscal year that they're going to start working on, but also they have to give what's called like a deficit outlook for the next 10 years. These are usually where either major spending cuts or major spending increases could be proposed. It is a non-binding agreement. The President of the United States doesn't actually sign something like this. It's just something for Congress to work off of. Once we get into the spring and early summer, the House of Representatives, particularly the House Appropriations Committee, starts to write, draft the bills for the next fiscal year, and then the Senate begins work usually shortly afterwards. But their work usually is more to roughly early to mid-summer. And as I mentioned, the fiscal year every year ends on September 30th, and October 1st is when the new fiscal year begins. So technically, that's what happens. That's when all 12 appropriations bills are supposed to be signed into law by the President. It seems pretty straightforward, and what's the best way to show how straightforward it can be? But a child smiling with a straight line, straight arrow next to it seems very, very simple, and shouldn't be an issue to me. Well, unfortunately, it never works out that way, especially this year, which was, 2017, last year was certainly interesting all the way up to last month. Now, last year we were in a new administration, and usually a new administration doesn't submit a detailed budget request to Congress. It's usually what's called more of a skinny request or a top line. And the President, Trump, did do that last March, but then they decided to submit a more detailed budget to Congress, and that didn't arrive until last May. As far as a budget resolution, Congress always, the goal is to always complete it by mid-April. Maybe it could slip into May, but this year, mostly because of tax reform work and other healthcare related work, they actually didn't get a budget resolution done until last fall. So it was pretty late. The House of Representatives only passed one of its 12 bills. The Senate didn't pass any. We hit September 30th, and not a single bill was signed into law. And if that happens, and technically the government shuts down. Unfortunately, Congress and the administration were able to keep things moving along. It did take 5 short-term spending bills, which are called continuing resolutions, or CRs, that got us, and the most recent one was getting us through to March 23rd, which we were, fortunately, Congress was able to finalize an actual budget and send it to President Trump for his signature. So the government's open, everything's being fully funded. A lot of new programs received a considerable boost in funding, especially CCDBG, but the arrow is obviously the way I describe it. It kind of goes all over the place, but you kind of wind up on the straight and narrow once you get something done, and this budget was really, really good for educational and early childhood development programs. So, with that, what is it that we are actually requesting from our members, and what is it that we want to talk about at our rally? And the big, obviously, as I mentioned earlier, we are going to seek for CCDBG a $1 billion increase over the current funding level. So roughly, we are seeking about $6.3 billion in discretionary money. With that increase, that would make up for the $500 million shortfall that we have currently based off of the congressional budget deal, where they were promised $2.9 billion this year, only got 2.4. That's still great, but we want Congress to maintain its commitment to children, especially the most at-risk children, and support their families. And so if we do get this $1 billion increase, that will meet what was promised in the budget deal of a total of $5.8 billion. We are also going to be pushing for non-budgetary legislation that's called the Child Care for Working Families Act. It is sponsored by Senator Patty Murray of Washington and Congressman Bobby Scott of Virginia. If this bill were passed into law, it would basically take CCDBG and convert it into a full entitlement, would provide nearly over $100 billion in new funding over the course of roughly the next decade. It would pump a lot of new investment into training and credentialing of the child care staff, obviously improving the quality and programs. It would specifically provide investment to the Child Care Resource and Referral Network and encourage them to help build out child care resource systems in areas where they're not available. It would obviously be a great investment towards the economy, help get more children ready for kindergarten. It would more than double the amount of children as far as eligible, and it would help double the amount gain access to CCDBG. It is a major investment. It is a new idea that was proposed by Senator Murray and Congressman Scott last fall, September of 2017. And we are, while we fully support it, not only us, but many of our other fellow advocates, national organizations support it. It is, what we are looking to do is to continue to build support for it and ask members of Congress to do what's called co-sponsoring a bill, which is add their name to this legislation. We're hoping that our work could hopefully make this a bipartisan effort. There are a number of co-sponsors on it already, but we are hopefully looking to build some more bipartisanship around this. So that is what we're going to be discussing in our meetings. One of the things I would like to, even though we don't highlight this on our screen, our information, including what's going to be, everyone on the phone, every attendee is going to be getting a participant packet, and that information is already available on our Day on the Hill website. As you can see the link below, usa.childcare.org.doth. It's going to have more information not only on the legislation and budget requests we have, but also it's going to offer you some helpful tips on how to advocate and how to message. It will also include other information on other initiatives we advocate for in some bills, including disaster preparedness, health, nutrition and response, and family and medical leave. So we encourage everyone here to visit that website. This information will also be shared at the symposium when you check in. And just want to let everyone know that, myself, Jake, and Chrissy, We're just a handful of people that will be available to serve you at symposium. We expect a lot of questions, and a lot of questions are good, and that's why we have asked many of our staff to also be around to help you out, whether it could just be helping you find a breakout session, or if you just have more questions about the federal budget process that I just described, or how does CCDBG implementation work, discussing the cost of childcare. I think many of you are aware our research team will be there, the ones that author our annual Parents in the High Cost of Childcare report, or just if you just have a general question in just on childcare itself. So there will be many of us available to you. Our name badges will identify us as staff, so we should be easily visible to everybody. Just want to let you know that we're there to help you, and that help you maximize your experience here. I know that probably a good number of you on the phone have done this before, but we also know there are folks on the phone that this is your first time, and we want to make sure that that it's worth your time, and you get the most out of it. So for our day on the Hill, obviously we have objectives. The most important one is to enjoy yourself. Fingers crossed that the weather will cooperate. It seems everybody's having an extended winter into April, when actually spring technically begun 2 weeks ago. But we want everyone to enjoy themselves. Be relaxed. There's absolutely nothing to be nervous about. The people you meet with are very friendly, and they will, while they might be very busy, they will treat you. They act professionally. They treat everybody with respect. And we want you to obviously get fired up at the rally, and then head off to your meetings, good to go. We want you to use this opportunity to build new relationships. We strongly encourage everybody that after you meet with a member of Congress and their staff, we encourage you to keep the line of communication open. They will give you their contact information, including their email address and phone number, and just feel free to keep sharing, providing anything that may be going back on that's going on in your state as it relates to child care. But moving public policy is depending on building relationships and new ones and maintaining existing ones. And most importantly, we're asking this for everyone attending meetings. Try to tie in your ask to childcare to a personal story you may have or experience with regards to cost, or if there was an incident in a childcare facility, or if anything how it maybe affected your job or your relative or a friend's job. We ask you to please tie that in, because when you personalize an ask, it really helps kind of heighten and advance the message. People like to hear, not only if you ask them to support a program, they want to know why they should, and why, and who does it benefit. And of course, this benefits children and families, what we are advocating for. So we of course ask you to make try to be as clear and concise as possible. Some meetings may be shorter than others. So, and we're going to actually, the day before, Wednesday, April 18th, we're actually going to do another prep session where we're going to show you examples of how to kind of role play on how to conduct yourself in meetings if you have 15 to 20 minutes, or if you only have 2 minutes to speak. So just, in short, it's going to be a great day, and, we just hope you enjoy it. And of course, it begins with our rally. It's on the Senate side. We're going to be in front of the Senate chamber at 8:30 in the morning. And for those who will be people standing on the stage, they'll be facing the Supreme Court. In other words, we're basically in the same spot we were at last year. As of right now, Senator Richard Durbin of Illinois and Jeff Merkley of Oregon are confirmed to attend and speak. We're hoping to get a few more people there, but just wanted to let all of you know that we do have congressional members already confirmed to attend. We're going to have other fellow advocates who will be there, as well as parents. And of course, once again, our MC is going to be our Executive Director, Lynette Frada. So this is how the day begins. We hope that this photo you see is from last year. It was a great turnout, and we hope to have even a bigger one next year. And I just want to close before we open it up for questions. And for those of you that do have questions, we ask that you please ask them. If you look on your computer screen, you should have the option where it says questions, where you can type them in. It's much easier instead of opening up phone lines. So if you have any questions, we will be more than happy to answer them for you. Just ask you please type them in the chat box. So, and for anyone who was wondering if you feel you may have missed something, or we are recording this, and it'll be on our YouTube page later this afternoon. So with that, we just want to offer you some tips on entering these Capitol buildings. As you can imagine, there is security. They are federal buildings. They do require you to walk through a metal detector, and they do have an X-ray machine where and conveyor belt where they ask you, for those of you carrying a purse, a bag, a backpack, all metal out of your pockets, and phones and stuff. It's like it's a lot like an airport. But to make this go as easy as possible, there are a couple of things there that we're asking you not to bring with you. Obviously, no weapons, knives, or anything sharp. That includes mace, pepper spray, no aerosols whatsoever. Not even they don't even allow aerosol breath mints, or they still make those anymore. So yeah, nothing, no sprays whatsoever. Please try to avoid bringing your suitcase with you. We will have buses available to take you back to and from the hotel, or just any large duffel bags, because it could slow up the process to enter, and they actually security may actually have to ask you to open everything and then go through all your belongings. And while the last one, and while it's not up there, this is just my personal experience as somebody who spends a lot of time on Capitol Hill, sometimes in a rush to get to other meetings. We mentioned earlier to wear comfortable shoes, and if possible, try to wear shoes that don't have metal in them, because sometimes in heightened security, like I said, it's like you're at the airport, and you may actually get the airport treatment if your shoes set off the alarm. And lastly, and we'll go into this in more detail. If your meetings are all these buildings are connected. All Senate buildings are connected through an underground tunnel, same as the House building. So if you have a number of meetings on the House side, you do not, or on the Senate side, you do not have to keep going back outside and entering through a different entrance. You can just walk right through the basement level, and it'll take you to the other buildings. Again, we'll go into more detail with this the day before during our prep session. And with that, I think it's time we can go ahead and open it up for anyone who has any questions.
Oh, wait. Yeah. All right. I apologize if I missed this part. Meetings will be scheduled by you. When will we find out when our meetings are? That's a really good question. So if we get everything scheduled with enough time in advance, we may actually try to send them out to at least one point person on each team. But if not, we will have them printed out on a schedule and given to the state teams at the Day on the Hill prep session.
Thank you for your question. Just seeing if there's going to be any more. We'll leave it open for a minute or so. I think another one just came through.
Wow, we must have done a really good job of covering everything.
I guess so. Maybe we don't need the prep session at the hotel after all.
Okay. I mean, I think if we don't have any questions now, but if something comes to you and you have a question on your advocates coming along or questions on the legislation, you can feel free to reach out to Jay or myself or any other member of the team, and they'll obviously find an answer for you. Oh, wait. Oh, I see one. Okay. Will the itineraries be more specific? Do we attend all of the plenary meetings? So if you are with a state team or an R&R, or you're just one of the people coming in from the States that is not a family advocate, you will get a much more specific itinerary, and it will also include all of the sessions and then the options for additional sessions. You can attend all of the plenary meetings if you want. Nothing's required, obviously, but you are more than welcome and you're invited to attend all of them. Hopefully that answers your question. Uh-oh, we have somebody who's not getting any of our emails. Karina, I will reach out to you separately and just forward you the emails that you've sent to make sure you have all of the resources. So I'll send you an email after this call.
And we apologize for that.
Yeah, it might actually be stuck in your spam filter. So that's something we've encountered before. We send them out through our email processing system. Okay, I haven't received an email mentioned earlier. Could I get information on the family advocates and any other emails I'm missing? Yes. So I will send you all of that info, including your state advocates as well.
Okay, why don't we just roll back to where our contact information is. This is the first slide.
Okay, all the way back.
Well, again, everyone, we want to thank all of you for joining us. We're really looking forward to everybody coming in DC. You know, it is obviously Child Care of America's 30th anniversary. So it's the biggest planned session, symposium that to date. Obviously, our day on the Hill is going. It's going to be a great day. But we're also honoring other people during our events at the hotel, including presenting Congressman Bobby Scott, who is the co-sponsor of the Child Care for Working Families Act in the House, with the Congressional Champion of Children Award, the evening of April 17th during our opening session. And we also have representatives from the administration present, as well as other VIPs throughout the week. So with that, again, I want to thank all of you. We look forward to seeing you. If you have questions, please feel free to reach out to myself or Chrissy. I hope you all have a great weekend.
Bye, guys.